All right, it's 2 o'clock. We should get going. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Luke. I'm the director of growth at LogRocket. Today we've got Andrew Evans hosting the meetup today, all about React versus Next.Js, which I'm really excited about. I've dabbled with Next a little bit and looking to hear Andrew's perspective on it. So yeah, before we get started, a couple promos. So this is Andrew's second meetup, and like I just mentioned, this one's lots of people are here, so it's great. We've also got one on Backstage.io, which is kind of different. It's actually developed by Spotify, and it's a framework for building developer portals, which is pretty cool. So that's next week, and then we've got a delayed one. Some people might have signed up for this one. Rapid development with GraphQL code gen, which is basically a way to just ship a lot of GraphQL queries a lot more quickly and has a lot of cool features. So if you want to sign up for those, you can just go to the blog/tech meetups. And yeah, so yeah, real quick, this meetup is brought to you by LogRocket. If you've never heard of LogRocket, you probably have heard of our blog, but we do have a very nice product that I really encourage everyone to go try. And yeah, here's just a quick view. We combine session replay, error tracking, along with product analytics to help you better understand your React or Next or Angular or whatever applications, also native mobile. So this is kind of our error aggregation view. And a lot of, I think, engineers start here, and it's just typical error tracking, kind of like Sentry. But what's really good about LogRocket, I think, is like you can really see the impact of these errors. So like right here, I've got a failed GraphQL error. I can go see like, this is affecting quite a few people. So I'm going to go change that to high impact so I can, track that over time. And then, as I'm trying to fix it, I can actually really be sure that the issue is fixed. And I can do that by just actually seeing the people who were affected by it. So basically I just click on the error and then I can see like, did the thing that's causing this bad request actually like impact the user experience? If it didn't, then maybe I can procrastinate and go fix other stuff. So yeah, if you have any questions about LogRocket, shoot me an email at luke@logrocket.com, drop a message. And yeah, before I have Andrew take it over, I will send the recording around after this. And yeah, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. So Andrew, you can take it away.
All right, cool. Thank you, Luke. Let me share my screen. All right, cool. You can see my screen okay? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Evans. As Luke said, today we're going to talk about React versus Next.Js. Before I start, I actually currently have a Zoom window open. I have a little presentation, but I was going to say that I've also done quite a bit of writing on like kind of the topic of Next.js. So like this is my personal blog, which I'm going to show in a minute. And basically this is actually all running on Next.js. I went through like a whole process migrating it, and I wrote a post about it, which is right here. Obviously, I also wrote a post for LogRocket, and that's what I'm going to be kind of referencing, and what I'm going to walk through today. In addition to just basically like doing a high level of what Next is I'll show you like a project that was written with Next and with React, and this is what I referenced in the LogRocket post. So I've got that running, and I'm going to kind of basically walk through and kind of compare different ways you do things, so you can kind of see how you use it with Next. And then finally, again, I'm going to show you this is my personal blog, and I'll show you like how this works and that kind of stuff. So with that, I will go ahead and start. And I'm also going to, because I'm jumping back and forth, this is probably not going to be quite as organized as normal talks, if you've seen me like talk before, just because I wanted to kind of, see where everybody, if anybody questions at the end, especially. All right, so React versus Next.js. So again, this is me. My name is Andrew Evans. I'm a manager at Cap Tech Consulting. I have 10 years of industry experience, and I primarily do front-end work, but I have done full stack. And I have a master's in computer science from Christopher Newport and an MBA from William & Mary. So Next.js, what is Next.js? You've probably heard about it a lot lately because it's a quick way to build projects. I have to say, like, after using it for multiple projects, it's a lot of fun to use, honestly. The tooling is very easy to understand. This is their website, and they have a great set of documentation that basically walks you through everything from kind of the kitchen sink to basically, you know, some specific issue that you're having. They also are very involved in the open source community. When I wrote one of my posts on Next, Tim Lukens, who's one of the maintainers of Next, actually reached out to me to clarify something in one of my posts. And I thought that was really cool that I actually got to talk to him directly. Beyond that, you know, some of the benefits is that they, you know, offer server-side rendering, they have pre-rendering, they also do automatic code splitting, and then they do routing based on files. So basically, instead of having to do a lot of these things where you would import them with the React app, with Next, all this is kind of coming out of the box. More specifically, if you wanted to look at React versus Next, React, basically, if you use like create React app, or if you even if you like pull it in from like a CDN or something, you have to end up, you know, including the React router. Oftentimes you'll use like a state management library like Redux. If you want to do SSR, you have to pull in like a package or something like that to do that. And then for styles and whatever, it's all kind of homegrown. The benefit of React is that you have that ability. You can do whatever you want. The problem is that you know, this is kind of boilerplate, and I've done many React apps professionally, and this is primarily the framework that I use. And I have to say that, like, the only frustrating part with React is that first couple of weeks where you're like setting up the project and you're like pulling everything in. Next does all that right out of the box. In a very short period of time, you can basically spin up a Next app that already has routing. It's got the support for styles. It's got pre-rendering, which I keep using this word, and I'll explain this in just a second. But this is it's a optimization for performance and for search engines. So all this comes right out of the box with Next.Js. So now let's go look at my sample project. So the project that and I keep moving this window, I'm sorry, but the little toolbar in Zoom is getting on my nerves. The project that I talk about in my post is basically, oops, oh no, sorry about that. There we go. The project that I talk about in my post is right here. So it's available publicly. You can go check it out afterward. But this is basically like a mini version of a bigger project that I've done called the Mandalorian Fan. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, like, as a side note, and I went and built this whole app. This is also open source if you wanted to go check it out. And I've got like stuff about the different seasons, information about the characters and all that. What we're going to do today is basically just a light version of this, and I'm going to show you, you know, those two side by side, and it's running locally right here. So I'm going to be referring to this. So let's dive right into it. So with React versus Next.js, basically, you know, these are the two apps side by side. With the React, you have, you know, your entry point, which is like your index.js file, or your, well, app.js file. You know, you've pulled in, you know, your browser router, you're, you know, doing routes with the components that you've built within the app. You know, this is all kind of standard React stuff. With Next, what you would do is, if you notice, there is an app.js, but there's no like index.js other than right here in the pages directory. So basically, once you create, they have a CLI, and once you create this app, what it will do is, this is the starting point. So this is basically kind of like your app component or whatever. And from here, you know, you'll build out your project. What you've noticed is that if you look at the header, whereas with routing in React, I had to use the browser router, or the the React router in general. With Next, what you're doing is you're actually just using link, which is a thing that's provided as part of Next. And what that'll do is it actually, based on what the file names are here, it will find those routes. So what this looks like is like /episodes. If I go to the site running locally, if I do /episodes, what that does is this pulls up this episodes page, and that's actually this component right here. That's all right out of the box. As soon as you get the project, started, you've already got this like kind of file-based routing, which I found is very intuitive and very easy to, kind of understand. You can also do stuff where you get like props and you pass, parameters and that kind of stuff, just like you would with any other front-end framework. But all of that, this is just kind of how this works. Additionally, since Next.js does a lot of things under the hood to try to boost performance, if you want to pull in something like like a header or like a head element, I guess, and those kind of things, you have to use these specific like _app.js, which basically in this case I'm using _app.js to pull in the styles so that I can have one place to load all my styles. In my personal blog, go over to that. What you see here is that there is a app.js, and then this is wrapping some Google Analytics stuff that I'm doing. And then over here in document.js, I've actually got the head element. So these two files, it's all in the docs, but these two files are basically how you would kind of do what you would normally do in like the index.html file in your React project. So back to the sample project we have here. In addition to all of what I've talked about, I want to go back to pre-rendering. So what Next offers with pre-rendering is basically they attempt to get it in a way that when a browser hits a site, it just pulls the pre-rendered asset rather than having to transpile the JavaScript and basically read your site. The reason that that's a big deal is because web crawlers have a hard time traditionally with like JavaScript and understanding how to like parse JavaScript. And so if you have a pre-rendered project, when you have site crawlers like something from Google or Bing or whatever you're using, those will see these pre-rendered assets and be able to do that search engine optimization a lot better. What this looks like in practice is basically, if you notice right here, we have Git Static Props. So this is the episodes component that I just showed you a second ago. What this is doing is it's basically, there's a whole API, and this again is all in the docs, but there's different ways to do this. But basically, if you have this function and you make a definition here, this gets called when the project is built. So basically, you're actually having a hand in the bundling process. And so what we're doing here is I'm pulling in episodes, which is from a local JSON file that I have, and then it's rendering this data object local episodes to show here. In my personal blog, you'll see in a second, I do a lot more advanced stuff, including an RSS feed that I generate on the fly when the project's built. The benefit of this is, again, is once it's finished, the assets and the bundle that has been generated is easier to be picked up by like web crawlers. Beyond that, the rest of the site is basically what you see, it's kind of the same thing. We've got like quotes. I think season 2 didn't have anything. If you look at the styles, I'm using, just normal Sass. I've imported everything into this one file, and then that's what I'm pulling in my app.js file. So a couple of other things that you normally see with React is I mentioned a state management library. So the situation with state management libraries are that you have a centrally stored place, source of truth for your project. And what happens with React is you would normally have something like this where you have a Redux folder. You have actions, action types, reducers. I mean, this is all boilerplate, kind of the Redux toolkit. But basically, you build all that to do that. With Next, in my post, I actually wrote and said that it was hard to do. Since then, I've actually found there's been a couple people that have implemented it, but I did have problems trying to do like Redux with a Next app, only because with the file-based routing, I believe every time you hit a new route, it's basically like doing a pull from your bundle. And there are ways around that, and I'm not going to go into that in this talk, but it is possible, and apparently several people have done it very well. So, but that's that, and then the pre-rendering are the reasons why I didn't pull Redux into this example, because basically I was using Redux in the React version of this project to basically pull in these episodes from like the central store. When the app is loaded, all the store is populated with all those. And with Next, since I have the pre-rendering all set up, it can pull in that JSON file and just generate everything. If you wanted to go back to their docs, Next also talks about server-side rendering, which gets a little bit more hairy. If you look at the API routes, they've got the routes with middleware. They have the data fetching. If I can find, there it is, data fetching. So what they do with data fetching, they also have a great number of examples. After this talk, I highly recommend basically just checking out nextjs.org. These examples you can actually go look at, you can walk through, and personally, like as I've built sites, I've been able to use those to help me, to figure things out. If you notice right here, we have Git Static Props. This is pre-rendering, and this is what I'm using in my example. You can also do Git Static Paths, which it'll specify dynamic routes, and this gets into situation like what I'm doing with my blog, where I have multiple blog posts, and so each new post is going to become its own route. You have Git server-side props, which will fetch data on each request. So server-side props is basically where you would do server-side rendering. So you can imagine that you would have an API that would have maybe a JSON file or JSON formatted, content that would then be used to generate your site. You would use this hook basically to do that. And again, all this is very well documented, and it's actually pretty easy to understand and use. So back to my personal blog. So in this post, I basically explained how I kind of went from WordPress over to Next. So I'd had a pretty beefy site that was on with WordPress, and I basically migrated the data, and I did a whole thing right here. This where I actually used a JavaScript like mini little program to parse the RSS from WordPress and then actually generate Markdown. And then what I ended up doing was, rendering the Markdown with Next.Js. There's a lot of stuff that goes into how I did that, and I'm not really going to go into that here, but I want to show you the source code because of some cool things that kind of highlight where Next can really shine. So basically, as I said before, you've got these two files that are kind of built in with Next. You have app.js and document.js. If you notice right here, this is basically wrapping the whole project with a use effect that is listening for page views. And so in my Google Analytics site, like I can, as pages get viewed, it's reporting back to Google Analytics. All of that is built right here in the app.js. In the document, if you notice, I've got a widget that I show on one of my pages. I've also got a link to the RSS, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then I'm also using Netlify Identity. Much bigger topic and a great platform if you want to check out is the Netlify CMS, which is what I'm actually using. The Netlify CMS makes things super simple. There's great examples. Netlify is pretty developer friendly, and I'd highly recommend checking that out. But all to say, that's why that little widget's right there. If you notice over here in my pages directory, I also have a post folder, and then I have an ID. And if you look right here, I've got all kinds of stuff where it's got a head element. All of this is basically like what you would consider a slug, I think is the right word for it. But basically, this is what is rendered for each blog post. What happens at build time is if you look right here, you have Git Static Props. What this is doing is it gets the posts and then it converts them over to HTML, and then it renders that content, right here. And if you notice, I also have Git Static Paths. And so remember, I said that there's Git Static Props and Git Static Paths. What this is doing is it's reading all of the content from the project and then basically generating routes. If you go to Get All Posts, you'll even go further and you'll notice that it's actually mapping based on the file system. So it's the bundler, when the project is created, is reading your local directory and then generating, post, basically all of what your site needs to navigate and that kind of stuff. This actually was originally copied. I found a place, an example from Next on GitHub that had this, and I was able to kind of work my way around this. Additionally, with the markdown to HTML, I'm using Remark. That was actually came from Tim Lucan's recommendation when I was working on this, that said that basically this is a lighter weight and it's easy, and it means your bundle will be smaller, which will be better for your performance. But that's the reason why that's being done. Beyond that, like the once the posts are generated and everything else, then your site is fed or served up, I should say. The RSS feed, which is the last part that I wanted to talk about. So I found multiple blog posts about essentially how to do this. I'm sure it's probably documented better now, but basically what I've done is I had to create a W3c compliant RSS feed. So there's a way you can do that. There's like a kind of like a tester, and you feed it the link to your RSS feed, and then it can tell you if it's compliant and all that kind of stuff. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating XML from the blog posts, and then that XML is then generates a big RSS feed. And the cool part about this is that once it's all said and done, if you go to the site and then you just type in RSS, you can get a straight RSS feed, and people can use this to like retrieve, for following me, you can also parse it. RSS is a very powerful tool, but all of that happens when the project gets built. And so again, this is another place where Next, you're basically kind of plugging into that build cycle, and then you're getting like a decent optimization as a result. And you think about if you wanted to do this with React, you would probably have to have some kind of step in your pipeline that would essentially generate that RSS, and then you'd have to include it in the bundle that gets deployed. This is all built into Next, which I think personally is pretty cool. And then the last couple of things I could talk about was like, this is how I converted the WordPress site into Markdown. I've had a pretty decent experience using kind of Markdown as the place, or the way to store my content. The posts that are written or that I write are actually stored all up here in this post directory. And so this again kind of like this is getting a little bit off the topic, but basically this is what Netlify Cms does, and then Next is hooked into that. But all to say, highly recommend checking out my post, and I also recommend just using this for your site. So the last thing that I'll talk about is basically just a couple of lessons learned. So with Next.Js, if you go right here to like the getting started, it's showing you how to use their CLI. Once you've created your app, then you can run it, and then they literally walk you through like everything from adding a page to CSS support and the like. This is from the point of like basically creating the project. This was pretty straightforward. The problems really came for me when I needed to do like weird things like my RSS feed, or if I wanted to hook into one of the other pre-rendering hooks that they have. I will say that when I worked on this project originally, and I worked with Next the very first time, it was about 2 years ago. And since then, a lot of things have been optimized. They have a lot more information. And so I would argue that really it's easier now to use than it was probably when I originally started using it 2 years ago. As a huge fan of React, it's very easy to kind of get started with this because it follows a lot of the same conventions that you would have with like a React app. as far as professionally, could you do this for a production site? I would say yes. I would say that this is very well supported. I've had a great experience. Like this, my blog. I've got it working on I've done a bunch of stuff to make sure it works on multiple browsers and different platforms and that kind of stuff. Never had a problem with Next.Js. So with that, I can open it up for questions. And if you had anything you wanted to ask, Luke.
I had a question, but we did have one in the chat. We actually have a meetup on this, but maybe you could give your own take. How can we add SEO to React and Next.js projects? I'll put the recording in there too, but I figured you could answer that.
Sure. Yeah. So SEO, like in a React project, you're gonna that's kind of like getting the there's a lot of ways to get SEO, honestly, but you get it a lot more into like essentially like traditional methods that you would use for like a web app. And then, if you wanted to optimize your bundle, then you could add like certain libraries that would help with like code splitting and that kind of stuff. With Next.js, it's all built in. And so I would have to say that like, of the two, that's kind of cool because that means you don't have to think about it, as a developer. But that probably doesn't really answer your question necessarily directly, but I would say on a high level, like that's kind of what you're looking at. You're looking at essentially the methods that you would normally use for SEO in like a web project versus just letting the toolkit do it for you.
We got a couple more. Does Next support module styles Sass filters or Sass files, e.g. my component.module.scss? So basically,
I believe, like, actually, let's look at the docs real quick. I believe that is the case. What I did, I've essentially built my own like set of modules for my project. So like I've got, even in the sample project, I've got like these are different Sass modules that are being imported, right here. All that seems to work pretty good for me. If you wanted to get into like some more kind of fancy stuff, their docs have a lot with, you can actually just search it a bit if I just say style. Yeah. So you can add like a style sheet, and then they have, you can import your styles from nodes if you wanted to use like Bootstrap. But anyway, and then they have Sass support. And so they do have Sass support for modules. So yes, that they do have that, and it's right here in the docs.
Cool. And then does the Next 12 significantly change how creating an Next app should be approached? Like, would you do anything differently if you're familiar with the differences?
I haven't actually been keeping up with the release cycle. Is that the newest version? Okay. Yeah. As far as my knowledge goes, I don't think it's that much different. I think the people that maintain the Next like project are very cognizant of developer experience, and then like also like they're very, very active responding to GitHub issues and that kind of stuff. So I would assume that they wouldn't try to rock the boat and make a huge shift. But I haven't really gotten to play with it, honestly, because I'm still using an older version with my project. But like I'll just assume that it's probably going to be more performant.
Cool. And then we've got one more, which is kind of my question. Basically, can I migrate my existing React project to Next? I mean, yes, I guess anything's possible, but I guess kind of related, like, what do you think the kind of biggest difference is for maybe a project like yours? Seems like maybe the routing is kind of the biggest change, or?
Yeah, I think like, I mean, when you get back to the whole, like with React, you can organize your app however you want, right? So like you have your home component, you can use the router to do the routing. You can make your own like kind of like routing mechanism. With Next, all I would say is that you basically just have to plug that into like the file-based routing approach. So you could even probably just take like your app.js file from React and then start it with your index.js file in Next. And then that, as long as you've organized your app, beyond that, then that should work okay. I mean, most of the time with React projects, I usually have a directory that has like literal pages, and then I have like reusable components. So like there's a few things. So I would assume that like, you probably would have to do a little bit of refactoring, but again, the syntax and the experience are very similar to React. So like your learning curve would be pretty low if you wanted to do that.
Cool, got a couple more questions. These are good, keep them coming. Can you explain how React's built-in server-side component works and what's the difference with Next? Is there one for Next?
Right? I actually I'll just pull the card and say I don't know the answer to that question.
Not sure.
I know like with like React, there's a lot of discussion right now about like server-side rendering, because they did the thing with there was a video last year, I think, where they had like an API that was feeding back. They were trying to optimize stuff. So I would say that like I don't know if that kind of thing is available with Next, but I will say that like using the API hooks that I showed are accomplishing a lot of that stuff. And I think if you take it a step further and actually have an API that you're calling, then I think like it would even be more powerful if you wanted to do it that way.
Yeah, I guess like isn't that kind of what Next offers with the rendering is kind of like that anyways?
Right, that's right. Yeah,
I just know because we can't actually integrate as closely with Next, our products, just to the way it renders. So we can't integrate with like the component level like we can with React.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, anytime you do like a project migration, I mean, it's definitely like it's not an easy task, like, I mean, no matter what you do, you're always going to have, some level of effort. But I think that because they're so similar, I think that like the conversion, hopefully wouldn't be that painful.
Yeah. And then another kind of pretty broad question, like how would you decide whether to use Next or React?
Well, I would say, I mean, if I had the ability to determine that for like a client project or something, I would say use Next. Like I would honestly just like go with it, because I've had unless you have like something tied to like a very pure React concept. The primary client that I work on right now uses Redux, and it's a very extensive React app. I wouldn't use Next for that, because for one thing, we've already built all that stuff. But the other thing is that there's a pattern there that's kind of enforcing that Next I don't think necessarily like facilitates. So that's what those are the kind of decisions that you would probably have to, think through if you're going to do that.
Yeah. And then one last one. I don't think I really understand this one. How does the new middleware feature change auth logic? Next middleware, maybe? I'm not sure what that one's talking about, unless you have an idea.
I would just say go to the docs for that. I know that they've I think I saw something on Twitter the other day about that, but yeah, I would just say go for the docs for that.
Nice. Cool. And then I had one question. So like the way you're doing slugs with that folder structure, was that Netlify CMS or was that Next kind of like filling that whole, like the square bracket ID in the folder structure?
So Next does the square bracket ID thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. That's basically following like the next thing. Netlify, what it does is the CMS basically, whenever you write a blog post, it creates a PR against a repo where your site is, and so then it's actually generating a markdown file, and then when you publish, it basically publishes a version of your site with that created markdown file. Which is really, really cool. I mean, like I've done a couple of talks internally with CapTech on like how to use Netlify like CMS. I've honestly had a lot of fun using it because it's like you control all of your own content, and then all their tooling is like it's a couple buttons clicked and you're done, versus like having to like try to pipe all that stuff on your own and going down that route.
Nice. We got another question. Any kind of general tips on improving Next.js performance? I'd say using it, it's much faster than a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like I said, like my primary project that I work on day in and out is React. So like I wish I had like an app at scale that I could be like, oh, that's it, but I know there's a lot of big companies do use Next. So like I would just assume that there's probably some benchmarks that they were using when they did that, and you could probably Google it and see more information on that.
Yeah. One thing is to use a performance monitoring solution.
Yeah,
quick plug
yeah,
for
like
LogRocket.
LogRocket.
Yeah, I think like what is unique about what we're doing rather than like a back end kind of APM or performance monitor thing is like we do focus on the front end, which Next puts most of the actual load into the browser. So I think like monitoring CPU usage, monitoring memory usage in the client is one thing we see people really care about for performance. Cool. Well, that's it. Thanks a lot. This is great.
Well, thanks for letting me do the talk. I appreciate everybody's time.
Cool. And I will send the recording around. And yeah, if you have any other questions for Andrew, find him on Twitter, or we could post on the original blog post, and he or others will answer. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.